Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent.
There are moments in television history that stop you completely. Moments where you forget you are watching a competition, forget the judges, forget the cameras, and simply feel something real and powerful moving through the room. The night Courtney Hadwin walked onto the stage of America's Got Talent was one of those moments. She was 13 years old, small in frame, wearing a black leather jacket that looked like it belonged to someone twice her age. She adjusted her fedora hat, glanced at the audience with nervous eyes, and then opened her mouth. What came out was not what anyone expected. It was raw, it was soulful, it was ancient in a way that made no sense coming from a child. Within seconds, the entire theater was on its feet. Within days, the entire world knew her name. But the story of Courtney Hadwin is not simply a story of overnight fame and golden buzzers. It is a story layered with years of quiet dedication, a childhood shaped by music, a single audition that changed everything, and then a painful chapter that tested everything she had built. It is a story about what happens when the spotlight finds you before you are fully ready for the world that comes with it, and what it takes to find your way back when life knocks you down hard. To understand why her journey matters, you have to go back to the very beginning, long before America ever heard her name. Courtney Hadwin was born on the 6th of May, 2004, in Heselden, a quiet and modest village tucked into County Durham in the northeast of England. It is the kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors, where children play in the streets until dark, and where life moves at a gentler pace than the rest of the world. Her parents, and Marie and Paul Hadwin, were hard-working, grounded people who believed in nurturing what was natural in their children. And what was natural in Courtney was unmistakable from almost the very beginning. She was barely 3 years old when music first grabbed hold of her. Her mother had a habit of filling the house with sound, playing records from artists whose voices carried weight and feeling. Courtney did not simply listen the way other toddlers might. She responded physically, moving her little body, raising her hands, feeling the rhythm in a way that suggested something deeper than ordinary appreciation. Music was not entertainment to her. It was communication. It was something she understood before she had the words to explain why. By the time she reached primary school, her teachers had already begun to notice. Her voice carried a depth and an emotional quality that was simply not normal for her age. A music teacher encouraged her to join the school choir, and those weekly rehearsals became the most important hours of her week. She was never shy about performing. Her classmates nicknamed her the Rocker Girl because she did not just stand and sing. She moved, she felt. She gave everything she had at every single song. Even at that young age, performing was not something she did for applause. It was something she needed to do, the way other people need to breathe. Outside of school, she pushed herself further. She practiced vocal scales in her bedroom mirror early in the mornings before classes began. She wrote lyrics in notebooks. At 10 years old, she gathered neighborhood children together and formed a small group they called Durham Soul, performing for anyone in the community who would gather and listen. Local newspapers took notice. A reporter described her as a young girl bringing soul to County Durham, and those words meant something to her. They told her that what she felt inside when she sang was actually reaching other people. That connection was everything. She also trained at Shotton Hall Theater School, where her mother drove her every weekend without complaint. There she learned the technical side of what she already did instinctively: phrasing, breath control, shaping a voice to carry emotion rather than just volume. She performed at local festivals and community events, building confidence in front of real audiences. By the time she was 12, the small stages of County Durham had given her everything they could. Her dreams had outgrown her hometown. In the summer of 2018, Courtney Hadwin boarded a plane to the United States. She was 13 years old and had never left England before. She carried a small suitcase, her leather jacket, her fedora, and a determination that was quiet but completely unshakable. She was heading to Omaha, Nebraska, to audition for America's Got Talent, one of the most watched talent competitions on American television. The scale of what she was walking into was something no small village in County Durham could have fully prepared her for. The morning of her audition, She arrived at the venue holding her fedora in one hand and her audition form in the other. Backstage, there were singers and dancers warming up in every corner. Names were called at random. Contestants waited in silence. Courtney stood quietly among them, breathing carefully, keeping herself focused on one thing only. When her name was finally called and she walked through that narrow hallway onto the main stage, the audience saw a tiny girl in a leather jacket who looked like she might have been lost on her way to school. Then the music started. The opening chords of Piece of My Heart filled the arena, and in those first few seconds, her voice came out soft, almost hesitant. She closed her eyes. She found the beat inside herself, and then something shifted. Her voice cracked open with a power and a longing that was completely at odds with her small frame and her young face. She stomped her foot to the rhythm. She moved across the stage with the authority of someone who had been doing this for decades. Every note was soaked in genuine feeling. There was nothing manufactured about it, nothing polished in the artificial way of someone who had been trained to perform emotion. This was the real thing. Simon Cowell leaned forward with his eyebrows raised. Heidi Klum sat upright, eyes wide. Howie Mandel covered his mouth with his hand. Melby tapped her fingers on the table, hungry for more. When the final chord rang out, the theater exploded. Every single judge rose to their feet. Simon reached forward and hit the golden buzzer, sending a cascade of golden confetti raining down over the stage, while Courtney stood in the center of it all, looking stunned, clutching her fedora, tears forming in her eyes. When a producer handed her a microphone and asked her about singing, she said simply that she loved it because it made her feel free. There was no prepared speech, no practiced humility, just the truth, offered plainly by a 13-year-old girl who meant every word of it. What happened next happened fast, faster than anyone around her had fully anticipated. The clip of her audition was uploaded online that same evening, and by the following morning it had accumulated more than 10 million views on YouTube. News outlets from the New York Times to the BBC ran pieces about her. Journalists reached for the comparison they felt was closest and called her the voice of a teenage Janis Joplin. Back home in Heselden, local newspapers ran her face on the front page. She had walked into a theater as an unknown 13-year-old from a quiet English village, and she had walked out as a global phenomenon. The weeks that followed were a blur of rehearsals, live performances, television appearances, and an entirely new kind of life. She appeared on Ellen DeGeneres' show, where Ellen embraced her, and the audience cheered before she had sung a single note. She performed on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, where the bandleader Questlove sat behind her on the drums, and the whole studio clapped along. She sang on The Today Show. She gave interview after interview. Record labels sent offers. Merchandise companies came knocking. Through all of it, Courtney tried to hold on to who she was. She called home after every appearance. She kept a journal. She wrote down reminders to herself that the singing mattered more than the fame, that the reason she had ever started was to share something, not to become something. Her mother's words stayed with her, the advice she had been given since childhood. Work hard, stay humble, remember your purpose. But the machine of celebrity does not slow down for 13-year-old girls trying to remember who they were before it all started. During the live shows of America's Got Talent, she continued to perform with the same ferocity and heart that had made the world fall in love with her. She sang Janis Joplin songs under dramatic lighting and sent the audience into a frenzy. Confetti cannons fired at the end of her sets. Judges smiled and nodded with genuine admiration. She advanced to the competition and found herself in the final stages, performing alongside acts who had decades of experience on her. She finished as runner-up, a result that disappointed some of her most passionate fans, but did nothing to diminish what she had accomplished. She had walked onto that stage as nobody and walked off it as someone the world would not forget. But the story did not end there, and this is where it becomes harder to tell. In early October 2018, Courtney joined a touring group of America's Got Talent finalists for a series of theater performances across the United States. It was her first proper tour, a series of back-to-back shows in different cities, and she was excited in the cautious, focused way she was excited about everything. She was still only 13. She was still doing her schoolwork with the help of a tutor. She still called home every chance she got. One night the tour bus was traveling through the Midwest, moving between cities on Interstate 94 in a heavy, relentless rain that Midwestern autumn can produce. It was late, close to midnight. Most passengers were resting. Courtney was sitting near a window, reading messages from fans on her phone, watching the rain streak against the glass outside. The driver was experienced. The route was familiar. There was no particular reason to feel afraid. And then the road curved, and a sudden gust of wind caught the side of the bus, and the vehicle skidded on the wet surface. The driver braked hard, but could not fully regain control. The bus slid sideways and came to rest against the guardrail with a crash that sent overhead luggage spilling into the aisle and threw passengers forward in their seats. Courtney was thrown against the luggage rack above her. In the eerie silence that followed the impact, broken only by the hiss of rain and muffled cries from other passengers, she reached up and felt blood at her temple. Her right knee throbbed with a pain that was sharp and immediate and wrong. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Paramedics moved through the bus calmly and methodically, assessing each passenger. When they reached Courtney, they found a fracture in her right kneecap and signs of concussion. She was taken by ambulance to St. Mary's Hospital in Madison, where doctors confirmed both injuries through scans. No surgery was required for the knee, but she would need 6 weeks of restricted movement and physical therapy. The concussion meant limited screen time and complete rest for her head. She lay in a hospital bed that night in a city far from home, 13 years old, her knee in a brace, a cut cleaned and dressed on her forehead. The tour she'd been so looking forward to now suddenly, completely over. News of the accident reached the public quickly. Social media filled with messages of concern and support. Fellow contestants from America's Got Talent posted get-well videos. Simon Cowell and Heidi Klum both recorded personal messages expressing relief that the injuries had not been worse. A GoFundMe campaign organized by supporters raised over $30,000 in less than 48 hours to help with her recovery costs. Theater managers canceled the remaining tour dates and processed refunds. The tour bus company released a statement blaming the combination of heavy rain and strong wind and promised a full safety review. Courtney lay in that hospital room and watched the messages scroll across the screen. Fans from dozens of countries sent her notes of encouragement. Some of them wrote that her music had helped them through their own difficult periods, and here she was now going through a difficult period of her own. After 2 days in Madison, she was cleared to travel and flew home to England under medical supervision. Her parents met her at the airport and helped her through customs and into the car, and when she walked through her front door in Heselden for the first time since the summer, she felt the particular relief that only home can provide. Physical therapy began the following week in a clinic near Heselden. Her therapist guided her through gentle exercises designed to restore movement gradually and safely. She bent her knee in small increments. She balanced on one leg for a few seconds at a time before resting. She stretched carefully and strengthened slowly. Progress came in small measurements: 2 extra degrees of movement, 5 extra seconds of balance. She tracked each tiny improvement the way she had always tracked improvements in her singing, with patience and with purpose. The concussion guidelines restricted her phone use and screen time to short intervals, which meant the relentless world of social media and fan messages that had surrounded her for months suddenly went quiet. And in that quiet, something unexpected happened. She began to write again, not lyrics shaped by the pressure of performance, but honest, personal writing about resilience and pain and hope. She sketched ideas for future songs in a notebook in her garden shed. She hummed softly to keep her voice active, to remind herself that the voice was still there, waiting. Friends from the neighborhood came to visit and brought laughter with them. Her mother cooked familiar food. Her father moved through the house with the steady, comfortable sounds of someone who had always been there and always would be. Recovery, real recovery, takes longer than the world is willing to wait. For someone as publicly visible as Courtney had become, there was pressure, subtle but constant, to return quickly, to perform again, to prove that the accident had not diminished her. But Courtney took the time she needed. She trusted her therapist. She followed her doctor's guidance. She let herself be 13 and then 14 in the privacy of her own home, away from cameras and golden confetti and standing ovations. When she did return performing, she came back with something that had not been there before, or perhaps had been there all along, but had not yet been tested. a depth of understanding about what it meant to lose something and then reclaim it. The crash had taken away her momentum at exactly the moment when it felt unstoppable, and working her way back had taught her that the singing itself, the pure act of opening her mouth and letting something real come out, was always going to be worth more than any platform it might sit on. In the years that followed, Courtney continued to develop as an artist. She released original music. She performed at events in England. She worked with producers who were interested in capturing what was authentic about her rather than smoothing it into something more commercially comfortable. The fierce, raw quality that had stunned America was not a phase of youth that would fade as she grew older. It was who she genuinely was, and she protected it carefully. She also spoke openly in interviews about the anxiety she had experienced as a child, a shyness and social discomfort that had existed alongside her stage confidence in a way that many people found surprising. The girl who could command a theater of thousands had also been the girl who found ordinary social situations overwhelming. She talked about how music had always been the place where that disappeared, where she felt completely herself. The stage was not where she escaped from who she was. It was the only place where she was fully who she was. The story of Courtney Hadwin is worth telling in its full complexity because it resists the simple version. She is not just a girl who stunned Simon Cowell. She is not just a cautionary tale of a child thrust too quickly into too large a world. She is not just a comeback story. She is all of those things together. And she is also something that cannot quite be categorized. A genuine artist who happened to be discovered at 13 years old on the biggest talent stage in America, who then had her trajectory violently interrupted by a rainy night on an interstate highway, and who found her way back through patience and family and the same love of music that had started everything in that small house in County Durham when she was barely old enough to walk. What makes her remarkable is not the golden buzzer moment, as extraordinary as that moment was. What makes her remarkable is everything that happened before it and everything that happened after. The early mornings practicing scales in her bedroom mirror. The Durham Soul Group performing for neighborhood crowds. The years of quiet, unglamorous work that no television camera ever captured. And then on the other side of fame, the hospital bed in Madison, the crutches in the hallway of her parents' house, the slow and careful process of rebuilding, and the songs written in a garden shed about resilience and hope. There will be more chapters to her story. She is still young. The voice that shocked the world when she was 13 has only grown stronger and more assured with time. She carries with her now an understanding of both the heights and the depths that most artists spend entire careers trying to reach. She knows what it feels like to have the world watching and cheering. She knows what it feels like to lie in a hospital bed far from home and wonder what comes next. Both of those experiences live inside her now, and both of them come out in the music. That is the real story of Courtney Hadwin. Not the overnight sensation, not the tragic accident, not the comeback. All of it together, every piece of it, told honestly, without simplification. A girl from a quiet English village who had something real inside her, who shared it with the world before she fully understood what the world would do with it, who survived what the world did with it, and who kept singing anyway, because the singing was never about the world to begin with. It was always, from the very beginning, just about that feeling. The one she described at 13, standing on a stage covered in golden confetti, holding her fedora, with tears in her eyes. The feeling of being free.